Hi everyone, it's Miss Potts here, and today we're going to be working with decimals some more. So let's go ahead and take a look at our focus for today's lesson. What we're going to be working with is division with decimals. So our focus for the day is to divide decimals and to solve problems by dividing decimals. And the question that you should be able to answer by the end of today's lesson and share with somebody else in order for you to teach somebody is, how do you divide decimals? Think about those steps that need to be taken in order for you to divide decimals so that you could possibly share that with somebody else. In order for us to have a really strong understanding of how to divide decimals, let's take a look at some vocabulary that we need to know beforehand. Let's take a look at the board here. Our vocabulary tip: we need to recall the names of the parts of a division problem. So let's take a look. We have our divisor, our dividend, and our quotient. The quotient of a division problem is the answer to that division problem. Our divisor is the number that we're dividing our dividend by. So in this case, we are dividing 18 by our divisor 6. How many times does 6 go into our dividend 18? Our quotient, which is the answer to our division problem, is 3. So we're going to be sure to really use that vocabulary when dividing decimals. So let's look at an example of dividing decimals. In this problem, we are asked to find 2.064, and we're dividing that by 0.24. The first thing that needs to be done in this division problem is that our divisor, the number that we're dividing our dividend by, can't be a decimal. So we need to move it over so that it represents a whole number of 24. And we're moving that decimal over 2 place values. What we do to our divisor, we also need to do to our dividend. So we're going to move that decimal point over 2 place values so that it represents 206.4. And then we need to place that decimal point in the quotient right above where the decimal point is in the dividend. So let's take a look. When we moved our decimal point over 2 place values, it ends up between the 6 and the 4. So we move that straight up into our quotient so that we don't lose our organization when dividing decimals. So let's take a look at an example together. Here we have 12.42 is being divided by 5.4. Using that terminology, 12.42 is our dividend. Sorry for my sloppy writing. And 5.4 is our divisor. That's the number we're dividing our dividend by. So rewriting that, it would look like this. We have 5.4 divided by 12.45 is being divided by 4.5. But notice that our divisor has a decimal point in it, and it's not being represented as a whole number. So we need to move that decimal point over 1 place value. And what we do to our divisor, we also need to do to our dividend. So we need to move that decimal point over 1 place value as well. So rewriting that, it would be 54 and 125.4. We're going to move that decimal point straight up into our quotient, and now we can solve. We need to figure out how many times does 54 go into 125. So I'm going to solve that over here. We have 54, and I'm going to go ahead and guess 2. Multiply that times 2. 4 times 2 is 8, and 5 times 2 is 10. If we would add 54 more, we would go over the allotted amount of 125. So let's go ahead and represent that as 2. 2 times 54 we've already figured out is 108, and we need to find the difference in that, which is 17. We drop down the rest, drop down our 4, and we need to figure out how many times does 54 go into 174. I'm going to add 54 more to 108 to figure out what that sum is. 8 plus 4 is 12, carry our 1. 1 plus 5 is 6, and 162, which would be multiplying 54 times 3 is equal to 162. Let's find the difference. 4 minus 2 is 2. 7 minus 6 is 1. There we go. Now, we don't have enough to take away, so we need to put another 0 and drop it down. 120. How many times does 54 go into 120? Well, it's more than 162. 162 is more, so we need to multiply 54 times 2 again. 2 times 54 is 108. We need to borrow. This becomes a 1 and this becomes a 10. 10 minus 8 is 2. 1 minus 0 is 1. So we're left with 12 again. And we're drop down that 0 and it's gonna become a repetition. It's gonna just keep on continuing with the 2. So we would rewrite our quotient to our division problem. Quotient would be 2.3. Whoops. With a repeated 2.32 with a repeated decimal. Here we go. And there is your quotient to dividing these two decimals. Now that you've seen an example, let's take a moment to review to see if we can answer the question of how do we divide decimals. Take a moment to think about that. All right, so now that you've had a moment to think about how you divide decimals, let's go ahead and talk about the steps that are taken. First, we need to make sure that our divisor is a whole number. So if we move the decimal point in our divisor, we also need to move that same amount in our dividend. And then we need to place the decimal in the quotient to reflect the placement of the dividend. And then from there, you can divide your values. If at any point you feel like you have any questions when it comes to dividing decimals, please don't hesitate to let me know. Also, please take a moment to answer the questions below to reflect understanding of how to divide decimals. And I will see you guys in live class. Bye!